You don't seem like the person who would speak negative of people, but I'd love to know where you think, the newer generation is getting it wrong. Maybe where you see, some of the weaknesses in, our audience, especially younger men.
I think we've all got views on people we come in contact with, and I can tell, generally speaking, I can tell within 30 or 40 seconds if I'm going to like that person or not. I think the key thing is, however you feel about a person, you must never be impolite. You must be mannerable. There's a guy who always comes to the front of my mind when I think about that thing, and it's Dennis Law. Now, I've known Dennis for 40 odd years, and I'd meet him on and off. He'd come to Aberdeen and that, or he'd be at certain football matches, and I'd interview him and so on. Dennis is one of these guys you could never say he's a horrible person, because he's just a good guy, and he's not the kind of guy who would pass judgment on people, certainly not publicly. And so I like that about Dennis Law, and the fact that he was a world-renowned soccer player, that he was the master of what he reached, the very pinnacle of his sport. That didn't make one blind bit of difference to Dennis. He's still Dennis Law, who came from Printfield up the road here. And so he's a kind of guy, I think, who would be a good example to hold up to young people today and say, look at this guy. There was not a better player in his day in the world of football than Dennis Law. And yet, his feet remained on the ground. He was still true to his surroundings locally when he came up. All the people he knew then, his neighbours and his friends and relatives, he still visited. He still kind of was the same Dennis Law who left to play for Huddersfield Football Club when he was a 15-year-old. He's the guy I would hold up as an example to young people to say, this guy is the real deal because he's a real person. He's not Dennis Law, the star footballer. He's Dennis Law, the good guy. And that's the kind of thing. If you could implant that kind of feeling into young people, then the world might be a better place. I watch kids, for example, in boxing. I was the MC, the ring announcer, at an amateur show about, 4 or 5 years ago. I used to do it all the time, help clubs out. And I did it. And there was this kid who was 10. And he came and he had one fight, novice champion, Scottish novice champion. This is the bizarre nature of amateur boxing now. They have novices, 3 to 5 fights, novice championship, 5 to 7 fights or whatever, and intermediates, and then seniors, youths, all that kind of, that needs to be streamlined, right? And he's coming in the ring, and I'm standing waiting for the 2 boxers to come in. He comes in first. He's had 1 fight, 1 victory, which was Scottish Novice Championship. And he's dancing about like Floyd Mayweather. And I thought, hang on a second, why isn't his dad, who was in his corner, why isn't his dad saying, calm down, just, you've not done anything. I remember vividly when I won the Scottish lightweight title in 1965, Saturday night in Edinburgh, and it was a big deal in the papers on Sunday morning, right? Because amateur boxing was a big deal for the media in those days. And me and my dad and my sister left the house to catch the bus to go to Mass. And I was feeling good about myself. I was now the Scottish champion. I'd won lots of Scottish youth titles, but senior one, this was a big deal. And my dad, for no apparent reason, because we hadn't spoken about it or anything, said to me, remember, keep your feet on the ground today. Keep your feet on the ground. I never forgot that, because I might have gone down into Lochee, into the centre of Lochee, in St Mary's Lochee, the church, and I might have had my chest further out than normal. I don't know. But he made sure that wasn't going to happen. And so I now think about that. You see kids and they're kind of, and they're in other people's faces and they're jumping about, and the kind of atmosphere that they have developed around themselves. I'm a champion, I'm going to beat you, and all that kind of. I think that is so negative, and I think it's bad for all kinds of sport, and certainly boxing, where it's one against one, and you're face to face, and you've got these people. And this is why I absolutely hate these press conferences, for example, where you see guys, many of whom are kind of mediocre or not even mediocre fighters, but they're face to face and they think, we're going to get, I'm going to psych you out, I'm going to stare you out. They get their pictures taken. I'm thinking, really? Let's wind the clock back. Let's go back to Marciano, Sugar Ray Robinson, Joe Louis, these guys will never attain their level of aptitude in boxing or competence. Let's go back to all these people and watch what they did. They shook their opponent's hand, they got their pictures taken. That was the end of no big press conference where fights broke out and people were throwing things and all that. That was decency. That was the kind of decency and integrity, the authenticity that was drummed into me by my dad. And they go and they fight and they hug each other at the end of, sometimes 15 punishing rounds in those days. And then it's all over. What's the big deal? It's done. So that's, I would love young people to be able to see that now, but they don't. What they see is the image that's presented to them by the promoters. And here's my question for the promoters. Do you think that kind of stuff, the aggro, the kind of pushing and shoving at the press conferences, do you think that sells tickets? I don't. I honestly don't. And I think what we've done now is we've moved professional boxing into WWE territory. So we've got all these kind of unnecessary peripheral things that are happening round about the actual fight. And we're kind of often losing focus on what we're doing this for. I would like to see that change back to what it used to be.
It's interesting you say that. Even, the UFC, I would say, leans closer to the WWE or the wrestling. And I see in there, there's guys like Alex Pereira who are solely focused on that respect of the art of fighting, and he's getting a big following now from that. And I think there are people coming back to that side of it's about the fighting, it's about the respect.
As many of you know, we are independent creators and filmmakers, but there is a massive attack on us right now. Traditional media over the last few years has started to slowly die. They are no longer the independent voice that you first thought they were. That's why we've created Mulligan Brothers Patreon. We've built something special for our most dedicated supporters, and I want to break it down for you real quick. The supporter tier gets you ad-free early access to both video and audio versions of Mulligan Brothers interviews 24 hours before it goes public. The executive tier gets you everything that a supporter tier gets, plus more. Exclusive interviews and behind the scenes content, walk and talks, daily routines, unreleased interviews, the stuff that you don't see anywhere else. And finally, the executive producer tier. Everything from the supporter tier and the executive tier, plus exclusive perks. Access to our treatment packages. Be the first to see which guests are coming up and get insight into the topics we'll be discussing before anyone else. And you'll even get an executive producer credit on every single documentary that we make. So if you've ever wanted to support the Mulligan Brothers mission of inspiring change so we can go around the world and get these stories that nobody else will, this is exactly how you do it. Go to patreon.com/Mulligan Brothers or click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. Join the community and help us inspire change.